families up and down the country with £1,200 going into their bank accounts right now, cutting taxes for 30 million people, £330 tax cut, and helping 500,000 people into work through the Way to Work scheme. That is a fantastic thing to be getting on and doing. That is the priority of this government, and that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm glad he likes it.
Ian Blackford.
My goodness. Nothing to see. We should all move on if we live in the world of the Prime Minister. You know, a few weeks ago I compared the Prime Minister to Monty Python's Black Knight. Actually, turns out I was wrong. He's actually the dead parrot. Whether he knows it or not, he's now an ex-Prime Minister. But he will leave behind two deeply damaging legacies. I hope the dishonesty of his leadership follows him out of the Downing Street door. But the other legacy is that of Brexit. And that will stay, because I'm sad to say that the Labour Party now fully supports Brexit. Mr. Speaker, Scotland wants a different future, not just a different Prime Minister. So if the Prime Minister won't resign, will he call a general election and allow Scotland the choice of an independent future, free from the control of Westminster?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I noticed that his remark that the Labour Party had given up on returning to the European Union was not greeted with rapture by the benches opposite, and that's because it's not true. They want to go back in just as he does. I think that is a terrible mistake. It would be anti-democratic, Mr. Speaker. And as for the referendum that he wants, well, we had one of them, as I've told him before, in 2014.
Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister think there are any circumstances in which he should resign?
I think, Mr. Speaker, clearly, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate that we've been given, or if I felt, for instance, that we were being frustrated in our desire to support the Ukrainian people, or over some major point, then I would. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going, and that's what I'm going to do.
Miss Savile Roberts.
Well, there you have it, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Prime Minister, he puts political survival before public duty. Yeah. But people can see, even if he goes, it's not an if, it's a when, isn't it? Yeah. The same Westminster arrogance will continue to dictate our futures in Wales. Yeah. Does he want a medal for being the best recruiting sergeant for independence we could wish for? Yeah.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, everywhere I look around the United Kingdom, I had a great talk with Mark Drakeford the other day, as well as talking to Nicola Sturgeon. I see the bonds of our union being strengthened the whole time, and I'm confident that they will continue to do so.
Link Drummond.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's town centre and levelling up funds have been very successful around the country, but there are a few town centres, like Waterlooville in Mearn Valley, that are in desperate straits and haven't managed to get any funding, get a scheme into the present round of funding. Can my honourable friend assure me that future funds will be available to help declining high streets become fit for the 21st century and survive the post-pandemic?
Yeah.
I thank my honourable friend, and she's a great champion for Mearn Valley, and I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the Minister for Levelling Up at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The public clearly thinks that this government has lost the plot over the cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister may be aware that the average salary for a nurse is £36,000. For a primary teacher, it is £38,000. They, and indeed working people everywhere, are struggling to pay their rents and their mortgages. Given they can barely afford a £150,000 mortgage on a new home, can he tell this House how he could afford a £150,000 treehouse?
What I can tell him, Mr. Speaker, is that up and down the country, rather than talking about fantasy infrastructure, I can talk about real infrastructure. We are helping to unite and level up the people of this country with £650 billion of investment, helping people, helping to lift the aspirations and opportunities of people up and down the country. And thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping exactly the people he describes with £1,200 going into their bank accounts to help them with the cost of living pressures.
Under the House to Peter Bottomley.
The Prime Minister knows that while he's Prime Minister, I want him to do all the good he can. While he's Prime Minister's Green and Present Land, can I refer him to EDM 1082 about the Goring Gap, the Chatsmore Farm, or to the Department of Levelling Up, the land above Goring Station, the farm in Worthing, which was fully protected and will be fully protected when another inspector says that Worthing Council protecting it will happen. Can I ask him to tell the government to withdraw their objection to Worthing Council's appeal against the absurd decision by a planning inspector to allow 482 homes to go on this green lung between Goring and Ferry?
Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable John very much, and he campaigns on this issue for some time. I will make sure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the development in Goring by sea.
Ian Legre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 21st of January, the government committed £100 million from the Automotive Transformation Fund to British Wool, to a gigafactory in my constituency, Calais, Wansbeck. And as of today, Prime Minister, not a penny, not a single halfpenny is being received by the company. And it jeopardises up to 8,000 much-needed jobs. The tensions between the Prime Minister and the former Chancellor have sadly now been much exposed. And I'm telling you, Prime Minister, the betrayal of my constituents cannot be another broken promise of this government. Prime Minister, give him a nudge. Please instruct your new bestie to make sure that the cheque is in the post this afternoon, because who knows who'll be in that seat this time this afternoon, never mind next week.
Can I congratulate the honourable gentleman on the passion with which he advocates investment in British Volt? And I totally share his enthusiasm. And actually, I want to thank my honourable friend, the member for Blythe Valley as well, who is a heroic campaigner on this issue. I can tell him that the letter was sent last night, Mr. Speaker, an in-principle offer of support for this project through. How about that? Hang on in there, Mr. Speaker. That's what I'm going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The world is facing a global food crisis in which the poorest nations face catastrophic consequences. Will the Prime Minister take all possible action to negotiate and facilitate access to the grain stores stranded in Ukraine? We have a limited opportunity to avert famine in developing nations, and the UK must play its full part, using all the resources at our disposal.
My right honourable friend is completely right, and there are 25 million tonnes of wheat that are basically being held hostage by Putin. That's equivalent to the annual consumption of many of the least developed countries, and we're helping to lift that blockade, not just by negotiation, but also by supplying demining equipment, insurance for the commercial ships that might be involved, and also 10 million to help improve the railway infrastructure that would be necessary to get the grain out by rail.
Mark Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister said that he is fed up of people saying things on his behalf. It's not just him that's fed up, so are the British people and his ministers who are resigning. They're sick of time and time again being sent out by him to say things that aren't true. Is the real problem him or them for believing him in the first place?
Mr. Speaker, I thank him very much, and look, I want to be clear. What I want to say is, I say it again. I regret the way the appointment happened, and I was clear with the House about what I knew at the time, but I want to stress that I take this matter extremely seriously. I'm very sorry for the impact it's had on the victims, but the individual in question, the member for Tamworth, is now subject to an independent complaints and grievance procedure. As soon as that complaint was made, I should say, Mr. Speaker, the whip was taken away.
Can I just say we don't know that is the case. It is confidential, and I think we've got to stop referring to something that we don't know there. And I want to put the House on notice that we don't mention it. Teresa Villiers.
Just over a fortnight ago, 2 horrific fatal stabbings took place in a quiet street in East Barnet. With the Metropolitan Police now in special measures for the first time in its history, will the Prime Minister urge the Mayor of London to start living up to his responsibilities as Commissioner? The Mayor needs to get a grip on crime, he needs to give Barnet its fair share of new officers, and he needs to abandon his plans to sell Barnet police stations.
Well, I do notice, Mr. Speaker, that crime has spiked since the previous Mayor of London, and it is the Labour Party that voted against stop and search, Mr. Speaker, that voted against increased funding for the police. And I think, as for the Labour Mayor, he'd do better to get out of California and take control of crime in his city.
And this water.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the NHS Confederation, not a single one of the so-called 40 new hospitals the Prime Minister promised at the last election will be built by 2024. 2 of those new hospitals are in my constituency. Hammersmith opened in 1902 and Charing Cross opened in 1818. They're not new hospitals and there's no building going on. Like all his promises, they exist only in his warped imagination, as this is likely to be his last Prime Minister's questions. Will he finally tell us the truth?
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, if he looks at what we promised and what we delivered, we said we'd get 20,000 police out on the streets. We've actually got 13,500 more already. We said we'd do 50,000 more nurses. We're already on track. And he's quite wrong about the pledge on hospitals. We're going to deliver them by 2030, Mr. Speaker. That was always clear. And the only reason we can do that is because we're putting the funding into our NHS, which he and his party opposed.
Gary Sambrell.
Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, in an attempt to boost morale in the tea room, the Prime Minister said at a table, but there were 7 people, MPs in the Carlton Club last week, and one of them should have tried to intervene to stop Chris from drinking so much. As if that wasn't insulting enough to the people who did try and intervene that night, and then also to the victims that drink was the problem. Isn't it the example, Mr. Speaker, but it's the Prime Minister constantly tries to deflect from the issue, always tries to blame other people for mistakes, and that at least nothing left for him to do other than to take responsibility and resign.
Order. Can I just say, you ought to be embarrassed by clapping. This is not a debate. Mr. Esterson, it's not debating society. This is... This is Prime Minister's questions. I want to get through the questions. There's other people want to catch my eye, and the way to do it is not by clapping. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's a very simple reason why they want me out, and that is because they know, Mr. Speaker, that otherwise we are going to get on and deliver our mandate and win another general election, and that is the reality, Mr. Speaker.
Vera Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister once wrote, "It is a wonderful and necessary fact of political biology that we never know when our time is up. Long after it is obvious to everyone that we are goners, we continue to believe our duty is to hang on to the perks and privileges of our posts. In reality, we are just terrified of the come down." So for the sake of this great country, will the Prime Minister heed the advice of his former self, get over his terror and do the decent thing?
Mr. Speaker, with great respect, I refer the honourable lady to the answer I have just given. When things are tough, of course people turn their fire on the leader of the country, but it is my job to get on and deliver our manifesto, which we are, and to deliver on the mandate on which I was elected, and to get this country through tough times, just as we got it through COVID. And that is what I'm going to do.
Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Around 1,000, I apologise, around 1,000 delegates from 100 countries are at the Freedom of Religion or Belief International Ministerial Conference over at the QE2 Centre today. There is still time for honourable members to visit. But will the Prime Minister agree with me that this significant conference will count for nothing unless it results in concerted global action to promote and protect freedom of religion or belief around the world?
I thank her very much. And freedom of religion and belief is integral to people's identity and their sense of themselves and their own personal freedom and security. And I thank her for the work she's doing as my own envoy on that subject, and also for the wonderful conference that she has organised. It was great to talk to her about it yesterday.
Mohammed Jasser.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join me in expressing my deepest condolences to those injured and affected by the explosion at a block of flats at Redwood Grove in Bedford on Monday, which has sadly led to the death of one resident, with others yet to be accounted for. This is a timely reminder of the dangerous work undertaken by the fire service. So will the Prime Minister join me in praising the emergency services who were at the scene, and also reconsider his 2% pay offer when firefighters have endured a real terms pay cuts of 12% over the last decade?
I thank him very much, and and I share very much his support for the firefighters of our country. They do an incredible job, and overall it's a testament to their work that deaths from fire over a long period have on average been decreasing, thanks to the work that they put in. We will do our best to look at the public sector pay review body offer and do our best to fund them as much as we can, but everybody knows the inflationary pressures that this country is now under. We don't want to have pay increases that are simply swallowed by price increases.
David Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The North Morton in my constituency was dubbed Britain's kindest village because this 160, wait for it, because this 160 home village committed to take 50 Ukrainian refugees. It has them all with them now. In the gallery today, there is a group of those hosts and some of the Ukrainians that they are hosting, including 2 young people who hope to go into Ukrainian politics in the future. Will my right honourable friend join me in welcoming them to this place and in thanking North Morton for their efforts?
I thank him very much for what he's doing to host young Ukrainians. Thank everybody actually in this House who's looking after Ukrainians. I think a lot of people are doing that. And can I say, I believe it's the wish of this entire House that those young people should grow up to live in a free, independent, democratic and sovereign Ukraine.
Peter Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the Prime Minister doesn't like walkouts and strikes, what legislation will he be introducing to stop further walkouts and strikes amongst his cabinet colleagues and junior ministers?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the whole House will have observed the brilliant performance on the radio this morning by the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. And that's no disrespect to the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, but what I think it shows, Mr. Speaker, is that in common with many sectors of the UK economy, there is a ready supply of skilled labour in the upper reaches of the Conservative Party.
David Davis. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the Prime Minister's attention to the words he used in response to my right honourable friend, the member for Worthing, when he asked the question earlier. 6 months ago, I called on the Prime Minister to resign because even then it was clear that his approach to leadership and integrity was already creating a pipeline of problems that would paralyse proper government. Today, I ask him to do the honourable thing, to put the interests of the nation before his own interests, and before, in his own words, it does become impossible for government to do its job.
Prime Minister.
I thank him very much for the point that he's made again. I've just got to, I respect. I just couldn't disagree with him more. Look at what the government is doing today. Cutting taxes for 30 million people. We've just completed a programme to get 500,000 people off welfare into work, Mr. Speaker. And thanks to the strength of our economy, thanks to the position that we're now in, which was because of decisions that we took that they opposed, and it's never forget. We are able to give £1,200 to 8 million of the poorest and most vulnerable families in this country. That is the right thing to do. We're getting on with it, and we will continue with our active and energetic programme for the benefit of this country, uniting and levelling up and unleashing the prosperity of the entire nation.
Final question, Clive Betts.
The Local Government Association has told us that over 400 families who have come to this country from Ukraine under the family scheme have subsequently presented themselves as homeless to local authorities. Because the local authorities haven't got enough accommodation, those people are going to end up in temporary accommodation. There's a simple answer. Local authorities could be allowed to contact the many thousands of people who volunteered to provide homes under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. The problem is the government doesn't allow families to transfer from the family scheme to the home scheme. When will the Prime Minister act to ensure people who have come thousands of miles to this country aren't placed in temporary accommodation, but we take on the generosity of those families who are willing to offer them a home?
I thank you very much for the very valuable point that he's raised, and we'll make sure that families are able to cross over from one scheme to another, and to simplify and speed up the process. But I don't think that should take away, Mr. Speaker, from the generosity of this country in welcoming Ukrainians. 135,000 visas have so far been issued through our uncapped scheme, both the family scheme and the Homes for Ukraine scheme. It's changing the lives of those Ukrainians, and I think we should all be proud of what we are doing.
We now come to the personal statement. I call Sajid Javid.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for your permission to make this statement. Yesterday, we began our day together. You, I, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, and members from right across this House, when we broke bread together at the parliamentary prayer breakfast. And we listened, all of us, to the words of Reverend Les Isaac, who spoke about the fact that responsibility that comes with leadership, the responsibility to serve the interests of others above your own, and to seek common ground of your party, your community, and above all, your country. Now, colleagues will be forgiven for my sense of déjà vu. Despite what it might seem, I am not one of life's quitters. I didn't quit when I was told that boys like me don't do maths. I didn't quit when old-school bankers said I didn't have the right school ties. And I didn't quit when people in my community said that I should not marry the love of my life. I care deeply about public service and giving back to this country that has given me so much. That is why, when I got the call from my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, just over a year ago, I didn't hesitate to serve again. It was a critical time for our country. Tough decisions needed to be made about when we were going to come out of lockdown, about supporting the National Health Service and the care sector under unprecedented strain. It has been an absolute privilege of my life to have been trusted with these responsibilities, and I can only hope that my best has been good enough. It has undoubtedly also been one of the toughest roles that I've had so far. The gravity of Home Office decisions, the scale of Treasury decisions, but nothing matters more than the health of your people, of the British people, especially and in the wake of a pandemic. Caring for people's health and well-being is truly a noble vocation. And so I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all of those across the country working in health and care sectors, as well as those that I worked so closely with in my old department, DHSC, and in the NHS. There is so much that I plan for the long-term reform of our health and care systems, and it is a wrench to leave that important work behind. Now, when I last gave a personal statement from this seat, I spoke about the importance of institutions and conventions. Today, it is about the importance of integrity. And don't worry, there's not going to be a series of these. Institutions and integrity are both central pillars that underpin our great democracy. It doesn't matter what your political perspective is in this House. I believe that we are all motivated by the national interest and that the public expects us all of us, to maintain honesty and to maintain integrity in whatever we do. This is not an abstract matter. We've seen in great democracies what happens when divisions are entrenched and not bridged. We cannot allow that to happen here. We must bring the country together as one nation. Effective governance inevitably requires loyalty and collective responsibility. Of course it does. And I'm instinctively a team player. And I have completely focused on governing effectively over the last year. But treading the tightrope between loyalty and integrity has become impossible in recent months. And, Mr. Speaker, I will never risk losing my integrity. I also believe a team is as good as its team captain, and that a captain is as good as his or her team. So loyalty must go both ways. The events of recent months have made it increasingly difficult to be in that team. It's not fair on ministerial colleagues to go out every morning defending lines that don't stand up and don't hold up. It's not fair on my parliamentary colleagues who bear the brunt of constituents' dismay in their inboxes and on their doorsteps in recent elections. And it's not fair on Conservative members and voters who rightly expect better standards from the party they supported. When the first stories of parties in Downing Street emerged late last year, I was personally assured at the most senior level by my right honourable friend's then team that, and I quote, there had been no parties in Downing Street and no rules were broken. So I gave the benefit of doubt. And I went on those media rounds to say that I had those assurances from the most senior level of the Prime Minister's team. Then we had more stories. We had the Sue Gray report, a new Downing Street team. I continued to give the benefit of the doubt. And now this week again, we have
büyük bir memnuniyet duyuyorum. Kendilerine bir kez daha Türkiye'ye hoş geldiniz diyorum. Somali 2011 yılında